Welcome to the Word on Woodward. I'm Daniela Bruce alongside Art Regner, and joining us today is Max Bultman, the Red Wings writer for The Athletic. Max, we're going to talk some draft today, and we're really excited to have you here with us.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for it too. It should be a really fun draft, exciting draft, as it always seems to be the last few years here in Detroit.
All right, I'm going to let Art get all the food talk out of his system because I know at some point throughout this interview he's going to bring up a wet burrito in Grand Rapids.
Well, that's because Max is a native son of Grand Rapids.
Okay.
And there are certain signs when you drive into the city that say home of Max Bultman.
And the wet burrito.
Favorite food, wet burritos. Because, as Max has pointed out several times, the wet burrito was invented in Grand Rapids.
People don't believe it, but it's true as far as I can tell.
Is it actually your favorite food, or is that just...
It's up there for sure. Like,
Okay.
I mean, I on a given day, I don't know, like, you know, it's a pretty bulky food. Like, it's not something you could eat that often, but in terms of like, if I was on death row and I was having a last meal, that is probably what it would be.
I am kind of curious though. Now, wet burrito just a red sauce usually?
Well, we had one in Traverse City that was a green sauce, and I thought it was pretty good.
Is that hotter? Is the green sauce hotter?
Probably depends on the place.
Oh,
But
okay.
I'm team green sauce.
They're
just
both
in
good.
general. I like
My
green
thing is I
sauce.
want
Yeah.
whatever color, I want it like a creamier sauce though. Like, I
Right,
don't
yeah.
want it just the kind of salsa you would dip a chip in. I want it
Right.
like more enchilada-ish.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know
wow.
if I've ever thought about it that way,
Yeah.
but I like
Now the burrito, meat, chicken,
Beef. Yeah.
beef.
Yeah.
Oh, beef all
Ground
the
beef,
time.
ground
yeah,
beef,
you,
yeah.
you look like it, man. You look like a big beef eater. So
Maybe you
Not
can pick the wet
really.
burrito 8th overall.
All right, so let's get into talking about that 8th overall picks. Max has written a series of articles profiling a few players that you think might be available at that 8th spot. We'll start with the first one in Marco Casper. Why you think he could be a pick that the Red Wings take at that 8th overall spot?
I just think he checks a lot of boxes for them. Number one, yes, is the position. He's a centerman. He played on the wing this year, but I think they expect him in Rugla where he plays. Obviously, Moritz Seider had played there at one point, William Wallander. I think they expect him to play center, at least some for them next year, and he definitely came up as center. He's got those attributes that you want to see in a potential top 6 center. He's fast, he's competitive, he's tough to play against. To me, those are all things that the Red Wings can use, and a lot of the things that they've targeted in these drafts. And so when you're going out looking in this crop, trying to see who's a fit for the Red Wings, those were all things that jumped out about Marco Casper right away.
you know, Max, when you look at this draft as a whole, several of these players that are eligible for this year's draft played a lot less games last year or didn't play at all, depending on what leagues they were in. I'm kind of curious because I look at this and I've looked at several mock drafts and all that. It is all over the road except for maybe the top 3 players. And then everybody else is, scattered. I mean, you look at the Red Wings, I think at this point, and I'm not exaggerating, I think it's 5 different players have been said that they're going to take at the number 8 spot. With that said, when I look at it, because of this draft, they need a center. And, well, this guy played center, but he played wing and all that. I think that they look at it this way, because the only way they're going to get a second-line center, because I don't think any free agents are coming to them, second-line free agents. Those guys don't even hit free agency for the most part. They're going to have to draft one. They're going to have to draft a guy who is a center, has played center his whole career, has never moved on the wing, and I'm not sure whom that player is, but I guarantee you it's going to be a center. It's just a center regardless.
I think there's definitely something to that. The one thing I'll say is when you start getting into has played there their whole career, like that can vary a lot, like legally. Dylan Larkin played a season of wing with the Red Wings, right? Like it, especially
But Henrik Zetterberg was his center.
no doubt, but he wasn't the only center on the roster, right? And so like when you look at like a Casper, like yes, he played on the wing, but it's because he was playing with pros this year. When I look at him, I see a center all day because of the speed, because of the aggressiveness and the willingness to play hard down low. That is one thing that you can't question in his game is his motor. And to me, if you're asking like what makes a center, it's the ability to play that hard defensive responsibilities down low, the ability to forecheck, and the ability to skate, and because you're going to have a lot of skating responsibility down the middle. To me, he checks every box as a center, even if he did play on the wing this year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I understand it. I'm not trying to, pick a fight with you. But
Am I going to have to break this up?
I think where they're at right now, truly with the Red Wings, and let's be honest, that's all we really care about, is that with that, I just think where they're at right now, and 8th is an odd position. I mean, it's a top 10, and there's 7 guys that are going to go before them. And I know that Steve says, I asked him, years ago, are you going to, are you drafting for need or best player available? He goes, the best player available that fills a need. And, you know, and he started to laugh, and I said, you're serious? He goes, yeah, I'm serious. Well, I look at it this way. Right now, where they're at, especially with the forward core, which they need to replenish, they need to, without question, draft a center at 8th overall, a guy that they pick, whomever that is, and I trust those guys. Boom, it's going to be a center. Center above all else.
Okay, well, let's get into this. You had Marco Casper
Yeah.
and Frank Nazar
Yep.
from the U.S. National Development Team. You also profiled him, also a center.
Yep.
Why would he be a good fit, potentially?
Honestly, similar reasons. A great skater. Like, it jumps off the page skating ability. He's also a tough competitor. He's a little on the smaller side relative to Casper. But I do think when you watch him, and how much of this is because, you know, Casper's playing against pros, he's playing in the program, you'd probably have a hard time parsing. But I think you see a little more offense that pops with Nazar, and it's certainly the playmaking. There was one game of his that I went to this year where he made this great pass across the zone, like really good vision to see it, and executed it. And so when you watch him on tape, I think maybe the offense jumps a little more, and he still has those elements of the speed and the competitiveness down the middle, which I think are very important.
He's drawn some comparisons to Dylan Larkin too, at least that I've read. So maybe that's it.
A little smaller than Larkin,
Yeah.
which always like makes it tough, but I do get what people are going for there, and obviously followed a similar path, right? Nazar is a Mount Clemens kid who's going to go to Michigan, and came through the program with a really talented group. Similar thing for Larkin. So little differences here and there in their game, but I think those core traits of the speed and the compete level are definitely there. I see that for sure.
Okay.
You know, I watched the U18s, and, you know, Logan Cooley would obviously, you know, he pulled a Michigan. He scored a Michigan in that tournament. But I always kept going back to Frank. I mean, I really thought that consistently, game in and game out, he seemed to be Team USA's. There might be guys that had maybe scored more goals or something, but he seemed to be the one that was the most engaged, the one that isn't afraid to go in the corners. And he's not that big, but he plays much bigger than he is, and he's a pretty wide body. I mean, I like Frank. I think that you know, yeah, I'm on a first name basis with him, but I'm really kind of leaning towards him. But there is an intriguing player who was rated at the very top of this class, who is tumbling down because he's all of 5'9", and that's Matt Savoy, who obviously, if you look at his offensive numbers, they're through the roof. Do you think it's simply because people look at Savoy, whom some people have the Red Wings taking as being someone that's just too small?
Well, I don't think he's too small to be in the NHL. I think he's still going to be a really high pick in this draft, but I do think he'll be on the board at 8 when the Red Wings are picking, and the reason is related to the size, more so with what you were talking about as, is he a center? Because when you can go around the NHL, and it's kind of hard to find that many 5'10", 5'9", top 6 centers, right? Like, a lot of the top centers that are going to pop into your head when I ask you, name a top 6 center, they're going to be 6'0", 6'1", 6'2", right? And part of it is because you need to be able to handle those tough defensive roles down low. Part of it is because you need to be able to go win those battles. And I think Savoy has the compete. He has the style of play that means if he want to try him at center, whoever drafts him, he's going to have a good shot to do it. But he's played both positions. He's played center and wing this year in the Western League. I forget which he played when he played in Dubuque last year in the USHL, but I think he's played both. And when I talked to him at the Combine, it sounded like he's comfortable at both. But I think if you're a team, how does the size come into play? Is he a center or not? And that's what I would guess it kind of comes down to.
All right, so you guys can check out all 3 of those in Marco Casper, Frank Nazar, and then, of course, Matt Savoy. Max profiled all of them and why they would be a good fit in Detroit on The Athletic. Check those out. Another thing you did was 3 different mock drafts, let's say, or 3 different scenarios for the Red Wings picking at that 8th spot. And you had him taking Casper, Savoy, and then the 3rd scenario was David Urachek, but he was still available, which is obviously a huge question mark. But sounds like it's a no-brainer if Urachek, and he's a defenseman, if he is there, they're going to draft him.
Yeah, the idea with that story was kind of, you know, it's tough enough to do one mock draft. Let's at least give ourselves 3 shots at predicting how the front of the board is going to play out. And that scenario, I think I called it the long shot.
Yeah, you did.
I do think it's a long shot. I think he's one of the 5 best players in this draft. But there's certain ways you could see the board falling. Urachek had a knee injury this year that kept him out for a lot of time. if a couple of the teams in front of him decide to go a different route, if they decide to go with one of the really highly offensively skilled wingers in Jonathan Lechero or Joachim Camel, could Urachek make it to the Red Wings? I would actually love to know your guys' thoughts on this, because the Red Wings have drafted so many defensemen like at the top of the draft these last few years. They've turned out really well so far, or appear to be turning out really well so far. To me, Urachek fits their type of defenseman that they like: a physical, mobile, big two-way blue liner with a great shot from the point. To me, at that point, he would be kind of that best player available, but they've invested a lot of capital already on D. And so, Art, like you talk about, it's got to be a center. How would you feel if they went with another defenseman, if it's given that it could be one of the best defensemen?
I don't think that's going to happen, because I'm going to give you a player's name, and this is the reason why it's not going to happen. Kent Johnson, who went to Columbus last year, which allowed Simon Edvinsson to slip right into Detroit's hands. Thank you, God. Because that's great. That's the no-brainer pick. I can't see Columbus letting him go. They're going to take him. So there's no way that either one of the top two defensemen are going to fall to the 8th slot. If they do, it's a difficult choice. I agree with you, because Steve's from the Scotty Bowman school, or, when in their heyday, the one thing that we always heard was you can never have enough defensemen. You can never have enough defensemen. So sure. I mean, they're going to have a stable of defensemen. They're all going to be like, they're all studs. They're all Kentucky Derby winners or something, But with that said, and then you can use them as assets. You can trade them. Does Detroit become appealing when you look at it? If Kosa keeps progressing like he is, and he's in the Memorial Cup now, boom, okay, man, Detroit. And Steve likes to build from the goal mouth out, as we very well know. Look at what Tampa's doing. I can see that happening. I just don't see, because there's only really two top-notch defensemen. I see both of them going before the 8th pick. If Columbus took Edvinsson last year like we all thought they were going to do because of the Seth Jones deal, boom, then okay, yeah, that makes sense. But there's no way Columbus is going to let a defenseman go. They're not going to go forward.
Well, he might be gone, but Art claims that he had Mo Seider on his draft board and thought it was a possibility at 6. So I'm going to let him roll with that one. But not many people did. So I mean, if Steve Yzerman does come up and take a defenseman or a winger or somebody that we didn't expect, are you gonna be upset that he didn't draft a center? Because I think I'm gonna trust him.
Well, you have a hotline directly to Steve, so yeah, he knows how I feel. But interesting though, Max. I really want to tell you: is there a surprise pick in your mind? Somebody that could blow you away? Maybe the dark horse candidate that they may end up taking?
I don't know. I don't have a great answer to it. I mean, there's a couple players who I think have a little bit of that real sizzle, like Pavel Mintyukov, who played in Saginaw this year. A little bit of a wild horse defenseman. Like, when I watched him this year, he was probably one of the more electric players I saw, right there with kind of like a Logan Cooley. And you saw the offense, you saw some physicality. That, I guess, would probably be the closest thing that I could see. But I don't know if I saw quite the defensive kind of like accountability there, and maybe that's something that can be reined in. But I just think when there are the centers that we've talked about in the Casper, the Nazar, and the Savoy there, and it is such a position of need, I think that makes it more likely to see a chalk pick. But there are some like fun players right there. I mean, Kevin Korchinski just had a great run for Seattle in the Western League playoffs. Like, it's always possible. Mm-hmm. But I think the fact that so many of the guys who are going to be there at their spot do fit their need, to me, makes that a little less likely. I don't know what you guys think, but
yeah. Well, what about Lechero Mackey and Joachim Camel? Jonathan Lechero Mackey, Joachim Camel. They're wingers, both supposed to be super talented. Lechero Mackey could be the best pure sniper in the draft. So if somebody like that is available at 8, is it hard to pass him up?
It could be, and I think ultimately the Red Wings need a lot of things, and that's where that Yzerman comment from a couple years ago comes in, right? We need the best player available. They still need everything, right? And so I don't think you couldn't justify it by any means. I think if both of those two guys who are great goal scorers, and Camel, and both of those guys had really good World U18s. I think Camel had a big hat trick. I want to say it was against Canada to help him advance, and they've shown these things that make you think, okay, this is a potential top 6, top line player. hey, if that's the case, like, and you feel that's the most valuable way to use your pick, I certainly would not have a problem with that. I just look at it similar to the way Art does. It's so hard to find these top 6 centers in the NHL, where it seems like if you need a top 6 winger, you can sign one, you can trade for one when you need him. When you need that top 6 center, good luck. Better draft one. That's how I see it.
See, exactly, and that is the way I look at it. Now, I also think this, and I think the Sundqvist deal shows where Steve's thinking, and it's difficult to get inside, especially Yzerman's mind, but I think they need size up front. I think they're looking at it, and God bless all the Red Wing forwards because they play, and they have high motors and their compete level is great. They're not very large. They're not real big guys. And I think that, Sundqvist is 6'3". I think, and if you look at it, a guy that I really like is our man Cutter, Gauthier, I guess. And but he's really going up the draft boards. And that's because I think he's a big kid and he's highly skilled. Another guy that I like, and I got him nabbed at Philadelphia at 5 because they like behemoths, is Geeky, because people, I know he's not really rated all that high, but, there's going to be surprises, as we know. I think both of those guys are gone. So a guy like Mackey or Joachim Camel, whom I really, really like, those guys could be available. But again, I mean, they're going to be tough to pass up, but I still think Steve's got to think, God bless Pius Suter, but we need a second line center. Boom. We got to see if, in 2 years from now, hopefully whomever we draft is going to be that second line center.
And it's interesting because you are doing this not necessarily for this coming season, not likely for this coming season. I don't think there's a player available at 8 who's dressing for the Red Wings this year, right? And so it's not going to address this summer. They're still going to have to look for that 2C in free agency, but it's that long-term view, right? It's if you want a center who's going to be with you for a decade, this is where you have to pick them. And the Red Wings have gotten some really good players in the top 10 these last few years. And they did draft Michael Rasmussen, who's a centerman. But I think it's probably time to spend one of these top 10 picks on a center, because we don't know how much longer they're going to be picking in the top 10. They made progress this past year. They may not be a top 10 picking team next year. And it just gets harder and harder to find that down the middle top 6 staple the later you get in the draft.
100%.
See, I think the thing that we tend to forget, and I used to tease him about this when he was a player all the time, is that the guy who's calling the shots is Steve Yzerman, and he used to walk to practice every day from Windsor to Little Caesars Arena on the Detroit River. So don't worry about that. He can do no wrong. So, I
was going to ask you if he took the bridge or the tunnel. Like, I almost believed your story for a minute. So.
He actually walked on.
It's not until the very end of that you realize where he's going with it.
He wasn't really fond that I would always say that to him, but he kind of understood what I meant. And so I think he still has capital. I know people are starting to say, well, don't you think the luster's wearing off Steve? No. It's not. And look, all you have to do is look at Seider, look at Raymond. Edvinson's going to be on the team next year. I mean, he's run 3 drafts and, or 4 now, I guess. But I don't know how you cannot, you're just going to have to bear with it. And he's going to do whatever he's going to do because he always is operated that way.
Well, and you can look at Tampa and see what the results of the patience are,
I was
right?
going to say, yeah. I mean, they're playing
Sorry,
in their
cut you
3rd
off.
straight Stanley Cup. No, that's okay. Great minds think alike, Max. But we do have to start wrapping this up. So we've talked about all of these players that you're profiling, potential situations. Who do you think it's going to be? Like, who, when you think of a player, or who do you want it to be? Who do you think's that perfect match for
Well,
the
I
Red
just
Wings?
can't shake the feeling that Casper checks all those boxes, especially you even talked about, right? Like, it's like these 3 guys have so many similarities, but Casper has this edge in the size. I get the other 2 guys may have a little more, like the offense pops a little more, but to me, when I look at the Red Wings, they do need to be tougher, and I think certainly up front they can get bigger, and I think Casper checks both those boxes. He can play a little mean, but he's fearless. He goes back there with speed, and he has shown like flashes of those offense. He had a great assist when he was playing for Austria at the World Championships against Team USA. Really good competition. I just keep coming back to him. I keep thinking that'd be my prediction.
I have a feeling, maybe because we're coming out of a COVID year and guys played and some guys didn't, that this is really, really a wide open draft this year. I guess we can say it about everyone, but man, this one just seems to be all over the road.
I get what you're going for there too, because I mean it's not just the gap in the year, although that certainly is a factor for a lot of certainly the Ontario kids.
Right.
But it's just that it seems like really concentrated top 5-6 players, and then it kind of gets all over the place. And we only obviously have access to the public list. We don't know what the teams are thinking, but if it's anything like what the public's thinking, I agree that the first round could be really fun, especially after those top 5 picks.
I love the surprises. That's the fun of it. That is the fun of it. Well, Max, thank you so much for joining us. And again, everybody check Max out on theathletic.com. There are so many
great stuff.
So many prospect profiles and all the draft or mock drafts that we talked about. So yes, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Always fun to talk with you guys.
And of course, a big thank you to all of you for tuning in to another edition of The Word on Woodward. We'll see you next time.